Hello, guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing another episode of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights, where we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people are making and use them to talk about some of the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. So today, we're now, as I mentioned, part 220. We've gone quite a few mods, I could say, but we've got here today. We've got quite a variety. We've got a couple crocodilians, we've got a couple primates, we've got some extinct animals too, and a bird as well, I think, as well as you saw on the thumbnail. So quite excited to talk about them. So first up, we're going to start talking about the New Guinea crocodile. So let's have a look at these guys here. Let's have a look at you here. Have a look at the male who's chilling there. So the New Guinea crocodile, or Crocodilus nova guineae. These guys are a small species of crocodile. Don't know what's happening. The small species of crocodile found in New Guinea, north of the mountain ridge that runs along the center of the island. The population itself, found south of as well, is found as to be different species, the Hall's New Guinea crocodile, which is quite interesting as well. And in the past, the species also include the Philippine crocodile, which was a subspecies, but now is its own species as well. So the New Guinea crocodile itself was first described by American herpetologist Carl Patterson Smith in 1928 as Crocodilus nova guineae. And they were, as I mentioned, long thought to be two subspecies as well, the Papua New Guinea and Western one, and also the Philippine crocodile, which is now lumped into split into own species. And then again, the New Guinea crocodile was split again. There's the Hall's or Crocodilian Hallei, which is the Hall's New Guinea crocodile, and then you've got the New Guinea crocodile, which is this one here, which is Nova Guinea, which is quite interesting. So these guys are closely related, as I mentioned, to the Hall's New Guinea crocodile, also the Philippine crocodile, and the freshwater crocodile. Those are its closest relatives within Crocodilus, which is quite interesting there. So in terms of description, it's not very big compared to most other crocodiles, but it's still a decent size. The New Guinea crocodile grows to a length of about 3.5 meters, or about 11 feet for males, and about 2.7 or 8.9 feet for females. And they can weigh up to 200 kilograms, or about 440 pounds. But in reality, not a lot of them get this size. Studies show they kind of average between 2.9 to 3.15 meters, or about 9 to 10 feet, and weigh between 123 and 186 kilograms. So it's typically around there. Their body, as you can see, ranges in a few different colors. They get to grey to brown, with darker bandings on the tail and body, but that becomes less noticeable as the animal actually grows, which is interesting as well. The longitudinal ridges in the front of the eyes and some granular scales on the back there is how you kind of ID this species. That's kind of how you define them against the Hall's crocodile. So the visual differences between them. The snout, as you can also see, is quite pointed in juvenile stages, but it becomes wider as the animal matures. So you can see this is the adult one. It's much wider. And they bear some similarities, as I mentioned, to the Philippine crocodile, but also the Siamese crocodile. And its colouring is actually quite similar to that of the freshwater crocodile of Australia, but its snout is somewhat shorter and broader, which is cool as well. So in terms of their habitats and areas, these guys tend to be found in freshwater swamps, marshes, and lakes in northern New Guinea, particularly in the interior, and actually have been known to enter brackish waters, but very rarely into coastal areas. But they're never found in the presence of competing saltwater crocodiles because they typically get outcompeted. So if there's any areas without, saltwater crocodiles near the coast, they will go there. Anyway, this animal was first described at the Sepik River in the north of New Guinea, or as well in northern New Guinea, Papua New Guinea, and its closely related Hall's New Guinea crocodile is found on the southern half of the island, and that range extends from southeastern Papua New Guinea in the Indonesian province of South Papua. It is separated from the New Guinea crocodile by the New Guinea Highlands, which is a mountain range that runs between the island. And DNA, as I mentioned, has found there to be different species in both genetics and morphology, so there are some decent differences there. And as well as estimated to be about 50,000 to 100,000 of both species left in the wild. So they are considered concern, but there is not that many of them in the world. Very similar to other crocodilians, they do have a mostly aquatic lifestyle like this, and are mostly nocturnal as well. and they spend much of the day underwater, often with their nostrils and eyes above the surface, and they swim with their tails, as you see like going on there. Very similar to most other species of crocodilian. But when they are on land, they tend to favour shady, dense areas of undergrowth, and they also tend to bask during the day and dispersing at night to feed. Typically, females will become sexually mature at about 1.6 to 2 meters long, or about 5 to 6 feet, and then the males at about 8 feet, or about 2.5 meters. We'll have a look at the cute little babies as we talk about the eggs, because they are very cute little babies, as you can see here. Little baby crocos, very, very cute. So these little crocodiles, they typically, the female lays about 14 days after mating, and in the northerly populations, the breeding will take place during the dry season of August to October. They then make a floating nest comprised of vegetation that is made in a shallow water location, such as like the edge of a channel, a lake, or a scroll swole over the side of a stream. They typically lay a clutch of between 22 to 45 eggs and lay them, and then will cover them in more vegetation. Though in southern populations, the wet season is typically chosen for reproduction. The nest is sometimes built in similar locations to the northern nests, but more often on land, and a smaller number of rather larger eggs are laid. In both populations, though, the mother will stay next to the nest during the incubation period to protect the babies, and this incubation period lasts for about 80 days. When the egg starts to hatch, the emerging young are quite vocal, and they make little chirps like that, which is quite cute. And both the male and female crocs have actually been observed taking these little baby crocodilians and taking them in their mouths and taking them to the water, and taking them to open water and carrying them quite delicately in their mouths. So when they're this young, they're obviously not going to be eating the same thing as their parents. So newly hatched New Guinea crocodiles feed on aquatic insects, spiders, tadpoles, freshwater snails, frogs, fish, and small mammals. But as they grow, they tend to eat a lot more fish, but they'll still eat anything of a worthwhile size. An adult diet is typically largely of fish, which is caught by sweeping sideways, their snout sideways, and snapping at their prey. But they'll also feed on shrimps, crabs, frogs, snakes, birds, and medium-sized mammals. They catch its prey by stealth, and with a flick of the head, they'll impale it on its teeth and crush it. Its jaws cannot move sideways to chew its food, and then they toss their head back, and that's why they swallow food. The crocodile is actually surprisingly agile, and has actually been known to jump out of the air to catch flying birds, flying bats, and leaping fish. And they'll also probe the bottom of waters, the bottom of the mud of the rivers to try and find small mollusks and crabs and things. And as I mentioned, we talked about those vocalizations a little bit. You can see they make those roaring sounds, and the little chirps when the babies kind of grunt as well. But in terms of the conservation, they were actually considered vulnerable by the IUCN in 1986 and 1988, but have then been, since 1996, lifted to least concern. And this was at the time it was stated that the animal had plenty of large tracts of suitable habitat, and that was thought to be good there. But during the 1950s and 60s, they were actually quite prized for their skin. The thought that the northerly population was actually hunted so much they were worried it went extinct. But then about 1970, legislation was actually put in place, and they actually received some protection. In 1977 and 1980, the harvest of wild skins for these crocodiles was over 20,000 per year, but then 1980s actually declined to about 12 to 20,000. As well as this, some 2,500 to 10,000 eggs and hatchlings were actually collected annually to raise on ranches. However, in 1995, the largest ranch on the island initiated a change of strategy to concentrate on raising the saltwater crocodile, obviously which is bigger and has more skin to it. And demand for eggs and juveniles for New Guinea crocodiles dried up, and since then the cropping of wild animals has been controlled by both Indonesia and Papua New Guinea. So there is some, pretty good restrictions on them, and some eggs and hatchlings have been removed of the nest and then raised in enclosures, and a similar program has more recently been initiated for southern populations. So there's a little bit of conservation work going to help these crocodiles. So yeah, really, really cool. Another really cool mod done by Sky Polaris, remastering one of their older mods. But this is another one we've got here. This is a newer one, one that's completely new. So we've got here the extinct crocodile Thorbjornsoni. So this is Crocodilius thorbjornsoni. So this is a very cool crocodile. So if you guys played Ancestors, or you watched me play Ancestors, you would recognize this animal. This is the one that like to gobble you up, of course. So these guys are an extinct species of crocodile that lived during the Pliocene and Pleistocene of the Turkana Basin in Kenya. And they're very similar to the related species Crocodylus anthrophagus, which lived in Tanzania. These guys are believed to actually be the largest true living, largest known true crocodilian, not like Sarcosuchus and Deinosuchus, which were not true crocodilians. This was believed to be the largest true crocodilian, as we'll get into. But the main way you can tell them from other crocodilians is they've got a very broad snout. They also have a small rims on their prefrontal bone, which is sometimes seen in Nile crocodiles. And they also have nostrils that open slightly forward rather than directly upwards, similar to that of Crocodylus anthrophagus. The largest skull itself was found to be about 85 centimeters or 33 inches from the tip of the snout to the back of the skull table. And this may sound like not too much, but if you compare it to an actual saltwater crocodile, the largest one is 76 centimeters or 30 inches. And based on this, it's estimated the total length could have been 6.2 to 6.5 meters or 21 feet. But analysis actually showed that they underestimate the size of these individuals, and it's very possible that these guys could have got to about 25 feet or 7.6 meters long. So in terms of paleoecology, these guys, crocodiles don't really turn their nose up to much in terms of food, and it's actually very likely these guys would have preyed on our ancestors like Paranthropus and early members of the genus Homo, which were both known from the Turkana Basin. And there's actually direct evidence of crocodilian predation on our early relatives, and that is known from bite marks on hominin bones from Uvalde Gorge, which is likely made by a closely related crocodile, Anthropophagus, which means human eater in Greek. And there's no hominid bones of the Turkana Basin that show these marks, and there's no direct evidence that the species in particular hunted hominids. But Nile crocodiles and knowing crocodiles in their anatomy and their biology and all that, I think it's very, very unlikely they would turn down a human. They pretty much just grab whatever they can. They're not too fussy. But they were much larger than any Nile crocodile, which does eat adult humans. And even at the time, humans were much smaller. Paranthropus and even early members of Homo were probably no more than 5 feet tall. So much smaller than most average humans, and even 3 feet tall, like probably barely over a meter. So they would have been a lot smaller, so would have been easily able to, eat a small human relative. And there's actually, as we mentioned, the lack of bite marks. We think that may have been due to hominins' awareness of the crocodiles and avoiding kind of open water where they would be hanging out. But likely, they probably did eat them. They probably just hasn't been fossilized for whatever reason. But anyway, so this species is known from 9 skulls, all of which are housed in the National Museum of Kenya. And the holotype itself is a nearly complete skull and lower jaw that is approximately 2 million years old from the Kubefora Formation on the eastern shore of Lake Turkana. And there's other skulls that range, but there's the oldest one is Pliocene, and the youngest one is about 2 million years old, so it's the beginning of the Pleistocene. And in terms of how this guy is related, it is related to Crocodylus anthropophagus, as we kind of mentioned before. They kind of form a group of like Paleo-African crocodylus between the West African slender-snouted crocodile and the Nile crocodile. So that's kind of where they fit in the crocodilian family tree. But yeah, another really cool species. Definitely a big fan. So we're going to carry on now. This one's actually a remaster. So this one's originally done by Jen and Leaf, but Gabor has actually gone through and made a bit of a remaster for this one. So that's quite cool. So this is the Patagonian Mara. So the Patagonian Mara is a very interesting little guy. This is Dolichotis patagonum. These guys are a relatively large rodent species and are also known as the Patagonian cavy or the Patagonian hare. So you can see they look very similar to a jackrabbit. They have very upright ears and long limbs, and the hind limbs are actually longer and more muscular than the forelimbs, and they have a longer radius than humerus. Their feet are quite compressed, and it's a great example of convergent evolution. Their feet are very hoof-like, which, as we mentioned, very similar to other small ungulates. Well, other small ungulates, such as chevrotains and small deer and klipspringers and those kind of ungulates. So it's a great example of convergent evolution, especially when standing and walking. You can kind of see that going on. The forefeet have 4 digits, while the hind feet have 3, and they have a short tail, as you can see there, short, depressed, and hairless. They have a grey dorsal pelt, with a white patch on the rump, which is separated by a kind of like a black area there. In addition, they also have a white underside, and you can see a little bit orange around their chest and chin around there. The average Patagonian Mara has a head to body length of about 69 to 75 centimeters, or 27 to 30 inches, with a tail that's about 4 to 5 centimeters, or 1.6 to 2 inches. So they're quite large, and they get between 8 to 16 kilograms, or 18 to 35 pounds, which is quite large for a rodent. They are up there with the biggest rodents. Pretty much the only things that are bigger are things like capybara and beavers. So they're up there in some of the largest ones. And unlike most other caveids, such as guinea pigs and capybaras, the anal gland is actually between the anus and the base of the tail, rather than being anterior to the anus, so that's quite interesting as well. So the scent glands are a little bit of a different spot. So in terms of their ecology, these guys are very interesting. They are found only in Argentina, and they prefer to live in areas with scrub cover, but they've also inhabited overgrazed and barren soils of the Monte Desert biome. So they tend to adapt quite well to open areas, as they're quite well adapted for running around in open areas. The cursorial is the term. So that's why you can see they're quite similar to a lot of ungulates, like, deers and things that, allow them to move wide distances. So they've been well adapted to the open plains and steppes, with their long legs, reduced clavicle, and well-developed sensory organs like the smell and sight and hearing, which allows them to better detect predators. So that's why they're often compared to things like deer and antelope. They're also largely herbivorous, and they feed primarily on green vegetation and fruit. And in the Monte Desert, monocots and grasses, they do prefer grasses most of the time, which is interesting as well. In terms of their activity, though, they tend to be diurnal, and they spend about 46% of their daily activities includes feeding, so they spend a lot of their time eating. Their temporal rhythm actually is related to a lot of environmental factors. So they tend to be out more when there's a lot more light, a lot more when it's a lot more light, a lot drier in temperature, like cooler temperature. But darkness and relative humidity also affects that. And the daily activity is unimodal in winter and bimodal in other seasons. And they prefer temperatures of about 20 degrees Celsius, with females spending more time feeding than males due to the gestation period and lactation, so they need to eat more to compensate. Males spend most of the day sitting around being vigilant for predators. Predators of maras include, particularly the young ones, include felids, gurasons, foxes, and birds of prey, and they're also host to a few different species of parasites. So what really makes these guys interesting, we'll have a look at a female, because why not? What actually makes them really interesting is their social behavior and reproduction. So their social organizations have a unique combination of monogamy and communal breeding. So they are monogamous, and they do breed in pairs, and usually they will stay together unless one of them dies, so they are very strongly monogamous. The male has almost a sole responsibility for maintaining the pair by following the female wherever she goes. A male will mark his female with urine and mark the ground around her with secretions from his anal glands, and with feces to mark her is pretty much saying, this girl is mine, don't mess with her. That's basically, what they say. Pairs breed together or alone, so they'll often, pair off and then go off and find a burrow. Or they will actually breed with other pairs in warrens, and these warrens can get quite big, up to about 29 pairs. So maras will breed, at least in southern Argentina, from August to January, and gestation lasts about 100 days. We'll actually have a look about the little babies now, because they're very, very cute. Let's see if we can find a little baby. There you go. It's a little baby mara, very, very cute. Most bursts in Patagonia occur between September and October, which is before the summer dry season and after the winter rains. So females will typically produce 1 litter each year, and they can produce as many as 4 litters a year in captivity. And the young can pretty much immediately walk postpartum, so after they're born, they're already able to walk and do their thing. Dens are dug during the breeding season for the young to be raised. Litters from 1 to 22 pairs are grouped together in these dens. Communal living provides protection, as there's a lot more, the survival rate of young being higher in large groups than those of smaller groups. One pair will visit the den at the time, and after 1 hour, the other parents will circle around the den. 1 or 2 pups are nursed at a time by a female, and the female may sometimes nurse the young of another pair. And while the female may prevent young other than her own from nursing her, some young are actually able to steal milk, which is quite funny. Mothers don't actively cooperate in raising their young, but for the first 3 weeks, the young will remain near the den. At this time, the distance between individuals is low, so they'll be, huddling together and grooming each other and playing a lot, so they tend to be, quite cute there. And after this, the young will actually leave the den and then graze with its parents, and the young are typically weaned at about 13 weeks of age. And these guys also are known for making quite a few vocalizations. They tend to emit like a wheat sound or low repetitive grunt to conspecifics. They also will tooth chatter and emit low grunts when threatened, and produce a series of short grunts when grooming. Scent marking is quite important for these guys, as we kind of mentioned before. They will kind of stretch and sniff the soil and sit upright and put their glands on the ground to kind of say, hey, this is mine. As we mentioned, they'll spray their hind limbs and urinate on a female's rump to kind of suggest, that this is mine. And the male's urination is meant to repel other males from his partner, while female urination is basically saying, I don't want to deal with you right now, leave me alone, unless she's receptive. So these guys tend to communicate quite a lot through their smells and pheromones and stuff like that. But these guys are actually considered an air-threatened species, so they're not doing too bad, but they do face some threats. Patagonian maras are considered air-threatened. Historically, though, they used to range from north-central Argentina south almost to Tierra del Fuego. Nonetheless, they have been greatly affected by hunting and habitat alteration and have been extirpated from some areas, especially including the Buenos Aires province. And mara skins often being used for bedspreads and rugs. But there is potentially also large populations in the United Arab Emirates from escaped pets, so they do tend to get out and do these things. But most part, they're doing quite well, which is quite good. But they still face those threats. But yeah, very, very cool. So this one was done by Jen and Leaf and then remastered by Gaboy. Really, really awesome. Oh, we didn't want to do that. Anyway, we're going to be moving on to another species. This is actually by a new modder. This is by Squash. So this is just drill. There's no man in this one, just drill. Mun's just drilled, Mundem. We've got here the drill, the animal, not the appliance. So here we've got this really beautiful mandrill. Then no man, just drill. So the drill, Mandrillus litrophagus. These guys are a type of old wood monkey and that are related to baboons and the mandrill. The drill is a short-tailed monkey up to about 70 centimeters or 28 inches in length. It looks very similar in appearance to a mandrill, but they lack the bright blue and red on the face of that species, so they tend to be a little bit more dull in color. They have a quite high degree of sexual dimorphism, with the males, as I'm showing up here, they can get about 20 kilograms or 44 pounds, while the females weigh about 12.5 kilograms or 28 pounds. And you can see the body is overall a dark grey-brown, and mature males have a pink lower lip, as you can kind of see there, and a white chin, on a dark grey or black face with a raised root on the nose. And you can see the pink is the rump is pink, mauve, and blue. And females also differ by lacking that chin. So we'll have a look at a female just to show you what that means. So you can see it doesn't quite have that chin there. The pink chin. There are typically 2 subspecies described, but they're not considered really distinct from each other. It's just a different population. And they are found only in the Cross River Strait of Nigeria, southwestern Cameroon, and the Bianco Island, part of Equatorial Guinea. And there are some areas around the Sojania River where they do actually live with mandrills, so that's quite interesting. In terms of their biology, though, a dominant male will typically lead a group of about 20 to 30 individuals that are multiple male and female, and is father to also most of the young in that group. This group may join others and will form supergroups of up to about 100 individuals. So these guys are seasonally semi-nomadic and will often rub their chests onto trees to mark their territory. They're also semi-terrestrial. They forage mainly on the ground, but will also climb up to trees to sleep at night. The females will then give birth to a single baby, like this little goober right here. But twins have been recorded in the Drill Rehab and Behavior Center and Breeding Center in Nigeria. The average longevity for them in captivity is about 28 years. And in terms of their diet, they are primarily frugivores, taking a wide range of fruits, but they also eat herbs, roots, eggs, insects, and small mammals on occasion. So So these guys are actually quite endangered. They are one of Africa's most endangered primates. So that's quite interesting there. They are listed as the IUCN as endangered. And this is mainly due to decades of illegal commercial hunting, habitat destruction, and human development. And it's believed to be fewer than 3,000 drills remaining in the wild, with the highest population estimates potentially only about 8,000. Though there is a total of 174 drills recovered from illegal capture and living in semi-captivity at the drill rehabilitation and breeding center in Nigeria, with actually quite high success rates of breeding there as well. And there's believed to be about 40 different zoos, or 40 individuals in zoos across the world. So there's a couple of zoos with them. I think there's a couple in America with them. But yeah, really, really cool species. Cool to talk about them. And nice to get a new modder. I like supporting new modders. So Squash, or Squash Gaming, I think that's how you call it as well. Really, really awesome mods. Done a great job. It's really nice to see some new modders on the scene. But here, next up, we've got Great Cakes mod dominating the rest of the day, it seems. We've got here the spider monkey. So you can see him doing a really funny animation there. So this is the black-headed spider monkey, also known as Electus eucoceps. So these guys are a species of New World monkey that is from the Central and South America, specifically Colombia, Ecuador, and Panama. So there are two different subspecies. There's the dominant subspecies that comes from northwestern Ecuador, and this is Rufficeps. This is from southwest Colombia and eastern. I think it's Rufiventris actually, from southwest Colombia and eastern Panama. So there is some differences between these ones. I believe this is the subspecies Rufiventris. So the nominate subspecies typically lives in tropical to subtropical humid forests between 100 and 1,700 meters above sea level, and they live in a population density of about 1.2 monkeys per square kilometer. These guys tend to be a little bit more higher up in the elevations, living in humid and dry and cloud forests that can live up to 2,000 to 2,500 meters above sea level, which is interesting as well. Hopefully we'll get to see some of the new animations. I got it when I tried last recording this, so we'll have to wait around again. But anyway, so in terms of description, the nominate subspecies typically has a black or brown body and a brown head, but these guys are entirely black with some white on the chin. The black-headed spider monkey is actually one of the larger New World monkey species, so they are generally actually considered, quite big. I don't know what you're doing there. You look like you're having a good time there. Anyway, their head to body length, excluding their tail, ranges between 39.3 to 53.8 or 15 to 21 inches, or 53 centimeters as well. And their prehensile tail is about 71 to 85 centimeters. In length, are about 28 to 33 inches. That's quite cool. Though on average, males weigh between 8.8 kilograms, or about 19 pounds, and females weigh about 19 pounds as well, but a little bit smaller, so very 600 gram difference. It's not huge. And they actually have a brain that weighs around 114 grams, which is quite interesting as well. So in terms of their diet, the black spider monkey is primarily a frugivore, so they eat a lot of fruit, consists about 80% of their diet, and the remainder of their diet is omnivorous and consists of leaves, nuts, seeds, bark, insects, and flowers. So in terms of their behavior, these guys are considered arboreal, so they tend to like to hang out in the trees. They're also diurnal. We'll actually see this one and see if he might actually try and hang out. We might try this one. He might be doing it. So they actually, as I mentioned, they are arboreal, so they like hang out in the trees. They're also diurnal. And they're quite social. They live in groups of up to about 20 individuals, but they will travel in smaller groups. The most traveling is done through brachiating or climbing through wooded areas. So they're quite good climbers. And they brachiate very similar to gibbons and orangutans and chimps and stuff like that. Oh, there he is. So this is the animation I want to show you. So this is some of the custom animations that Great Cakes mod has added to some of these spider monkeys. So it's really cool that we get some custom animations as well. Let's see if you do it again. We'll just carry on. We'll watch and do this. There you go. Do it again. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? It's cool to see some custom animations as well. It really helps sell, the monkey. It really looks like something a spider monkey would do. And, because we don't really have a spider monkey rig in the game. So they've done a good job really giving us that. But anyway, we're going to carry on and talk about the reproduction of these little baby monkeys. So we get more of them. So in terms of reproduction, when mating, females may consort with a male for up to 3 days, or else mate with several males. Mating occurs when the male and female face to face and can last for about 5 to 10 minutes. The gestation period is about 226 to 232 days, and the infant rides on its mother's back for about 16 weeks and is weaned at about 20 months. Females will reach sexual maturity at about 51 months, and then males about 56 months. It takes them a little bit longer to get a little bit bigger to compete. And they give birth typically every 3 years, so they're quite a slow breeding animal. They are also sadly considered quite endangered, and they're considered quite endangered by the IUCN, with an estimated population loss of more than 50% over 45 years from humans and hunting, and also human encroachment on its range. But they do live actually a pretty decent amount of time in captivity, about 24 years. And hopefully some captive breeding and stuff like that will help out the species in the future. So yeah, really, really cool. Really, really cool. So nice to see some new animations and a really cool mod by Great Cakes. And Great Cakes, has got the rest of these mods going down here. So let's have a look at these guys. So this is actually an extinct species of cat. So this is very interesting. This is Danamophilus. So Danamophilus, they're a genus of felid that is known from Namibia and during the early Miocene, so about 20 million years ago or so. And its name is Danamophilus ferox. So this genus itself was described in 1998 based on the basis of remains discovered in Arisdrift in Namibia and dates to about 17.5 to 16 million years ago, which is the early Miocene. The holotype itself is the left mandible, which includes the canine and cheek teeth, and there's been since some other parts of the animal been found, including a ulna and other fragments as well. And there's also was a second species that was Danamophilus minor, which is now considered Namaphilus, its own genus. So these guys are actually one of the largest known felid from early Miocene of Africa. Their size has been described to being about slightly smaller than a cheetah, or about the size of a small cougar. So in terms of in comparison to other species, it actually has quite short mandibles as well, and the short jaws were allowed to take proportionally smaller prey than those of longer jaws, and its length, the jaw determines, that the gape distance. So smaller jaws allows them to take, smaller prey, but also this shows that the animal would have already looked quite cat-like even as early as it was in the family tree. It looked quite cat-like with that rounded face and shortened muzzle and that dentition going on there. So that's quite interesting. Hypercarnivorous dentition. And looking at its anatomy as well, it actually, since Africa at the time was a lot more forested than it was today, and during the Miocene, Africa was very much covered in forest rather than the savannas that we think about it today. A lot of its anatomy is actually quite similar to the margay, which is South American felid that is quite well adapted for climbing. So it seems this animal would have been quite well adapted for climbing and dealing with and living in the forests, and not that well adapted for running around in open plains, or being less cursorial. So that's interesting as well. In terms of its taxonomy, except for its close relation to Namaphilus, which was once a member of the genus, its affinities are not well understood. It's clearly not particularly related to Catiphelus, which I've actually covered before, and which has more advanced characteristics. It actually has been suggested that Acephalus actually originated from a different dispersal event, and these features are Polydoros grade, suggesting they're more basal than Machaerodonts and felines. There's some similarities there to the Barbofelid Afrosmilus, which was originally considered to be a felid, but we really don't know where it fits on the family tree. So it's a little bit of an interesting kind of, where does it go? Where does this guy go? But in terms of its paleoecology, it does have quite a rich paleoecology. The locality itself was a side channel of the Proto-Orange River and occasionally filled with flowing water, perhaps where the river overflowed during the raining season, though the rest of the time it was a pretty shallow pool. Its presence of giant tortoises and Crocodylus gapirensis indicated it was a much more tropical place than it was today. And its habitat was likely bushy, rather wooded savanna, and a gallery forest along the river. So it did share its habitat, as you mentioned, Namaphilus and rhina, same habitat, and other small types of carnivores, including types of averids, which is Orognisus, the Stepiopterid africanaris, and the large mustelid Namib-Nictus, and also Hyaenurorids. Also were bear dogs, so there's Amphicyene gigas and Hyaenodonts living there as well. So it's quite rich in terms of its ecology there, so lots of big predators, but also lots of mammals as well. So there was smaller animals in the faunal assemblage, such as the Myohyrax and the spring hare Megadipleistes, other types of lagomorph, and other types of rodents and birds. There was some larger prey, including small bovids or large hyraxes, Pyrrhohyrax. Hyraxes used to be much more diverse, they were very large ones. This was quite a large hyrax. But there were other inhabitants, such as small suids or small pigs, a type of chevrotain, some extinct giraffe relatives, a type of aardvark, and a couple actually extinct elephants as well. The Afromastodon and Prodinotherium actually is known from this locality as well. So yeah, really, really cool mod. You can see really give that, try to create something that's a bit more interesting. That's what Great Cakes mod actually quite sells quite well in terms of her paleo reconstructions. And it's cool, yeah, we got like a melanistic one as well. Done a really good job making this guy feel distinct from other cats. Definitely a big fan of this one. So yeah, that's another Great Cakes mod done. But last but certainly not least, we're going back to South America. We have got the the Darwin's Raya or the Lesser Raya. So since we already have the greater Raya in the game, we've now got the Lesser Raya. So these are the smaller of the two species of Raya, and these guys get to about 90 to 100 centimeters tall, or about 35 to 39 inches. Length is about 92 to 100 inches, or about 36 to 39 inches, and they weigh between 15 to 28 kilograms, or 33 to 63 pounds. Like most ratites, they typically have a small head and small bill, but they have a long neck and long legs. They have relatively larger wings than other ratites, so they're actually able to run quite well, and they can reach speeds up to 60 kilometers an hour or 37 miles per hour, which allows them to quite easily outrun predators. They have sharp claws on their toes, which actually is quite effective weapons, and the feathers are quite similar to those of ostriches, though they have no aftershaft. And their plumage, as you can see, is a spotted brown and white, and the upper part of their tarsus, as you can see here, is feathered. And their tarsus is about 28 to 32 centimeters or 11-13 inches, and has 18 horizontal planes on the front. And the beak there, they have quite a short beak that's between 6 to 9 centimeters, or about 2.4 to 3.6 inches in length. So this is the male here that we're looking at. So it's quite interesting where the name come from. They actually are known as Nando Pesto or Nando del Norte in Argentina, where most of them live. Nandu comes from the greater Raya's name in Guarani, which means a big spider, and probably to relation as they often lower their wings when they run, almost look like a big spider. In English, Darwin's Raya gets a scientific name from Rhea, who was a Greek goddess, and Panita, which means winged, so basically the winged goddess. Its scientific name was bestowed in 1837 by Darwin's contemporary and rival, Achille de Olgobi, say that, who first described the bird from Europeans from a specimen in the lower Rio Negro, south of Buenos Aires, Argentina. And it was actually classified in its own genus for a while, Pterochimera, but then the latter was kind of, so Pteron, which means feathers, and Creme, which means leg, so basically feather leg. But then it was actually synonymized with Rhea, so they're both now considered the same genus. There is 3 different subspecies described, with 2 northern taxa, Galarpi and Tasperensis, which are kind of the more northern ones, and the more common southern one is the dominant subspecies from the Patagonian steppe, Panita. They are sometimes described as 2 species, so there may potentially be 3 species of Rhea in the future, but this is typically the 2 subspecies. They're both subspecies, or 2 different populations as well. So in terms of their behavior and diet, these guys are mainly herbivores, so they're, big herbivores. Well, I've got a female. Big herbivores, with the odd small animals such as lizards, beetles, and grasshoppers eaten on occasion. They do primarily eat saltbush and fruits of cacti, as well as grasses, roots, seeds, and leaves. They also tend to be quiet birds, except as chicks, where they whistle mournfully, and the males looking for a female, they'll emit a booming call. So the males of the species during the breeding season become aggressive once they're incubating eggs, even towards females, and the females thus lay a lighter egg near the nest, and then rather than in it, and then most of the eggs are moved into the nest by the male, but some will remain outside and then rot and then attract flies. So typically they'll lay it and then kind of dip out because the male can be aggressive. So that's quite interesting there. The male and later the chicks will then eat the flies. The incubation period is typically about 30 to 44 days, and we'll have a look at the cute little baby when we talk about the babies. Very, very cute little ones. So they, as I mentioned, 30 to 44 days, and have a clutch size between 5 to 55 eggs. The eggs are about 87 to 126 millimeters, or about 3 to 5 inches in length, and are greenish yellow in color. The chicks will then mature by about 3 years of age, and outside the breeding season, they're actually quite sociable, and they can live in groups of about 5 to 30 birds, and both sexes and a variety of ages. So in terms of their distribution, Darwin's raya lives in areas of open scrubland in the grasslands of Patagonia and on the Andean Plateau, though the countries of Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, and Peru as well. All subspecies prefer grasslands, marshlands, and bushlands. However, the dominant subspecies tends to live at lower elevations, while the other two subspecies tend to live at higher elevations. So the dominant subspecies lives at less than 1,500 meters above sea level, while the other subspecies live between 3,000 and 4,500 meters above sea level, which is interesting as well. So the story of the raya is quite interesting. It actually inspired the theory of evolution, as we'll get into. So we'll talk about that. So during the second voyage on the HMS Beagle, the young naturalist at the time, Charles Darwin, made many trips to the land, and around August 1833 he heard of guanchos in the Rio Negro of northern Patagonia, and heard of the existence of a smaller raya, which was considered quite a rare bird. He then continued to search fruitlessly for the bird, and as the Beagle sailed south, putting it at Port Desire in southern Patagonia on the 23rd of December. On the following day, he shot a guanaco, which provided them with a Christmas meal, and on the first days of January, the artist Conrad Martins actually shot a raya, which he enjoyed eating before Darwin realized this is the smaller raya that he was on about rather than a juvenile, and proceeded to preserve the head, neck, and legs and one wing as many of the larger feathers, so tried to preserve it as much as he could. As with the other collections, they were sent to John Stevens Henslow in Cambridge, and on 26th of January, the Beagle entered the Strait of Magellan, and at St. George's Bay, Darwin met Patagonians he described as excellent, practical naturalists. So this person was half Indian who had been born in northern provinces, told him that the smaller raya were the only species this far south, while the larger rayas kept to the north. On an expedition up to Santa Cruz River, they saw several of these smaller rails, which were too wary to be caught or approached closely. In 1837, though, Darwin's rail was described as Raya darwini, was later synonymized in the species by John Gould, who was an ornithologist, in a presentation in the Zoological Society of London, which he followed by Darwin reading a paper on the eggs and distribution of these two species. And what's interesting as well, initially, when Gould classified Darwin's raya and the greater raya as separate species, he actually confirmed a serious problem for Darwin. So these birds mainly lived in different parts of Patagonia, but there is an overlapping zone where these species coexist. As each living being had been created in a fixed form, had been accepted by science at the time, basically believed in creation, then they could only change their appearance by a perfect adaptation to their way of life, but they would still be the same species. But now he had to deal with two different species, and this actually started to form his idea that species were not fixed points. So a raya will not always be a raya, or a Tiktaalik will not always be a Tiktaalik. It was species not fixed at all, but there was another mechanism at work, and that mechanism was evolution, and that's evolution by natural selection, how animals will change and respond to environments over time. But yeah, they are still quite important to our understanding of the world. So Darwin's raya is now characterized as least concerned by the IUCN, with the former southern nominate subspecies remaining relatively widespread, but locally fairly common. with estimated range of about 859,000 square kilometers. The situation for the two former northern subspecies is a little bit more worrying though, and their combined population could be as low as the hundreds. However, though, they are classified as rare tishmanensis by the IUCN, and they are regarded as near threatened. So there's potentially 3 species, with the primarily threats being hunted by being hunting, egg collecting, and fragmentation of habitat due to conversion of habitat to farmland and pastures for grazing. So yeah, they are threatened by a few things, but they're not doing too bad. The other 2 populations, the other rays, may be a little bit of a spot of bother, but other than that, all good. Patagonian National Park in Chile's Ancón region hosts the Reproduction Center for Darwin's Raya Conservation, and this center is run by Thompson's Conservation and is supported by the National Forest Corporation. So cool, or corporation. So that's quite cool. Nice to see that we're doing a good job with most of these species here. So yeah, I think that's about it for today. Really nice to see a cool raya. Nice to see those species that kind of just fill out the roster a bit more. So if you want to have the smaller raya, you can. But yeah, very, very amazing. So yeah, I'm going to thank everyone for today. So thank you, Sky Polaris, for your crocodiles. You've done a really good job, especially remastering that New Guinea crocodile. You're really working on updating things. Thank you, Gaboy, for updating Jens and Leafs, Patagonian Mara. Nice to see some older mods getting some love too. Thank you, Squash, for that new mod, The Drill. You did a really good job with that one. And thank you, Great Cakes, for your Spider Monkey, your Dynamophilus, and your Raya. You did a great job as always. So yeah, I think this is a great place to end the video. So I really, really, really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always look at the little bell icons to get notified of anything. So if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.